Hello, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, by the way, for keeping the applause until I got to the stage, because there's nothing worse than it stopping halfway. So that was lovely.
I did notice you walked quite quickly to make sure.
Yeah,
that
I wasn't taking any chances. No. No.
So we've got you here to talk about creativity.
Yes.
And
I assume David Walliams was unavailable, so.
Actually, I don't believe that is the case. You've been listening.
Okay, unaffordable.
You've been listening. Maybe. You've been listening in and listening to some of the issues that have been raised when it comes to creativity and matching that creativity up to delivering results. How does that reflect in your life?
Well, I'm still a TV viewer, and so, you know, I like the adverts. I always have done. When I was a kid, before I learned pop songs, I knew advertising jingles. So I feel that there's a relationship that you have with adverts that starts at a very young age, which is why you have to be responsible with them, of course. But my favourite commercials from growing up were the ones with characters in, you know, and in many ways they influenced me and David probably as much as other TV shows. And yeah, the Hofmeister Bear, I remember very well. Even Busby, the cartoon, before your time.
No, Busby I remember. BT, yeah?
Yeah, BT. Yeah, I loved them. And I remember, I mean, one of my earliest memories is watching the football with my brother and father and being so bored by the football and just waiting for the adverts. And that's what I liked, yeah.
Okay, and you could be described as a master of characters.
I would wrongly, but thank you.
Well, no, I don't think so. George Dawes, Marjorie Dawes, Vicky Pollard, you know, great characters. We've seen some of them behind you. Do you have a favourite? I've got to ask you.
That one. Do I have a favourite? Well, I used to really like when we did Lou and Andy because it felt like something very idiosyncratic with me and David. You know, that only the two of us could do together. And I rather liked playing Marjorie because she just said things that I wouldn't dare say.
Really?
Yeah, she was mean. So it was kind of fun. And David felt fresh to us in that you'd seen characters like Mr. Humphreys on Are You Being Served, who'd been camp, but it felt like the first character that actually said he was gay. So that felt like a new thing. And then interestingly, you've got the ladies up there that you wouldn't do today, I think, because we look at transgender people in a different way. We have more knowledge of them, and we don't think of transgender people now as a man trying to convince you they're a woman. We look at somebody who's transitioned as a woman. If they were a man and they've transitioned to a woman, they're a woman, or at least I do anyway.
Yeah.
So we would do that very differently. So interestingly, that in some way, that's a social document of its time.
It really is. It's interesting as well, knowing, how do you know when you've got it right? Because we're seeing so many more characters in advertising, in marketing now. How do you know when you've got the tone just right and it's going to appeal?
You know, I always think of comedy as a dialogue between you and your audience, and it's the same with your commercials. You know, ultimately, you get a sense from market research groups, but ultimately, and also, I guess, what the client says, but ultimately, it's to do with sales, isn't it? I mean, if you're selling a product and you sell more of them, then you got it right.
But you have to get it right before it goes on telly. You have to pitch it and convince someone else.
Yeah. So what we would do when we were doing Little Britain, for instance, is we'd have about once a month, we'd have a session with our script editor, whoever that was. So we had Mark Gatiss from the League of Gentlemen did the first series, Rob Brydon did the second series, Richard Herring did the third series, and these were people with great comic voices who we admired a lot. And we'd sit with them and with our producer, Jeff Posner, who's a sort of godfather of comedy, and we would just sit in a room and just read all the sketches. And actually, as much as anything, it was just time effective, because I think when David and I started out, we might write 6 sketches of a character and then get into that room and actually no one's laughing at the first sketch and we're embarrassed by the second sketch, and then we don't even read the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th sketches. So actually we learned that it was good to hear other people's voices quite early on in the process. You can go to the other extreme. I was one of 3 writers on a big American animation feature at one of the big studios, and they would call us, the producers would call us during the meeting, "What you got?" And that was too much. That was too much. "What you got?" "No, he shouldn't be a bluebird, it should be green." Like that. You go, "Well, I don't even know what he's called yet." But so that was putting the cart before the horse. I found that too much. But I think it's really useful to find really intelligent people who've done it before, people with experience, and listen to them. You know, and that was as much a part of Little Britain as anything else, as anything we wrote, was listening to other people. When we very first read Lou and Andy, far right top, to our producer Mavamwi Moore and to Mark Gatiss from the League of Gentlemen, actually Andy couldn't walk, and he really genuinely was in the wheelchair, and there was concerns like, is there a risk that you're depicting disabled people in a certain way? And we went and thought about it, and actually realised we could expand the idea if we did the whole pantomime thing of he's behind you, you know, he can walk, but Lou doesn't know. So sometimes when you have a meeting like that, in the second draft, actually the bigger idea comes. I suppose in the tech world they call it a pivot, don't they? You know, with an app that was meant to sell sausages suddenly becomes an app for selling shoes or something like that. The big pivot.
The light bulb moment almost.
Sausage-coloured shoes, obviously.
I have had a note that it's still muffled in terms of sound at the back. Can you just raise your hand if you're at the back and you're having problems hearing it?
Well, they won't be able to hear that because...
They will hear me. They will hear me. So we're all right, are we, in terms of sound? Excellent, okay.
Raise your hand if you can't hear us. No, sorry. I'm not making life easier. Sorry.
No, it's fine, I'm used to it. You spoke about memorable characters. In advertising, there's that point, isn't there, when sometimes you see an advertisement and you think, just turn it off, I can't bear it. I can't bear this character. And it's gone from being memorable to annoying. How do you know, or what advice would you give to... I'm not looking at you and thinking of a character.
No, it's okay.
There's a fine line to tread because it's got to be prevalent in people's lives, but it can't annoy them.
I think that's interesting because I think sometimes your relationship is on this continual change. I go like sometimes I'm in a go compare mood and sometimes I'm not. You know, and sometimes the meerkats, sometimes the meerkats, and then the meerkats again. And it depends actually what they're doing in that particular commercial, but. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, interestingly enough, with Little Britain, we did it. Our success was also sort of the thing that what made us broke us in a way, which was that the show was the first big hit on BBC Three, and BBC Three was free to air, and people were getting set-top boxes, and so they were. People said, "Oh, you've already done that sketch," but actually. We hadn't, but you'd already seen it because BBC Three was just repeating the shows. So sometimes it's just feels like overexposure to an existing thing. You know, I noticed that I watched the Channel 4 on my computer. I can watch Channel 4
on demand. I think.
On demand, and in an advertising break, for some reason. I feel like they might even show the same advert twice. Well, certainly when I'm watching the show, and there's 3 or 4 advert breaks, I will see the same advert in every break. And that, to me, feels unwelcome. You know, so it isn't always what you do. Sometimes it's how often you show it. That's only my opinion. It's not scientific.
And when you do have a character like the meerkats, for example, how do you keep, with that in mind, as that seems to be a trend in some advertising, how do you keep that character interesting? How do you time that development, I suppose?
I think
they change.
You don't be afraid of being in your time, I would say. So, for instance, I can only say that if we were to bring Little Britain back, there's not necessarily any logic in, for instance, still having Vicky Pollard at 14, now that I'm 44. So maybe if we brought Vicky back, she'd now be 44 and she'd have her 7 children would all be 14, and that would be a new dynamic. And I think personally, I think be bold and keep the dynamic fresh and be reactive to what's in the culture. So, for instance, if we brought Little Britain back now, David would have Grindr and Tinder, and he'd have, you know, Facebook, and there'd be, you know what I mean? So that's my feeling is live in the world as it is now and look at the things. You know, if we were doing Vicky now, she might be addicted to Fortnite or something like that. You know, you try and don't be afraid of the zeitgeist, I would say.
Another thing that you've managed to nail with your characters is even if they're only seen for a short period of time, even if you're someone who doesn't watch all your programmes, you recognise the characters. They somehow permeate your subconscious or life.
Yeah.
And that would be an advertiser's dream, wouldn't it?
When you say recognise, do you mean you recognise their attributes, or you physically recognise them, that they're
I
physically
suppose both,
distinctive?
and phrases as well. Like if someone said something to you, you'd go, oh, right, Little Britain.
Right, yeah. So one of the things we tried to do is just to keep the sketches quite short in Little Britain. And I think this was partly because we'd all watched the Fast Show, and the Fast Show really changed the game and did just speed up the sketch show. If you watch Little Britain now, it probably feels quite slow because we've got used to much quicker kind of viral sketches that sometimes grab you in a matter of seconds. But the way our characters looked, I mean, David was very clear that he felt that you should be able to almost draw each character with a single stroke, that it should be like a comic strip. So some of these things are accidental, and we used to go to Carlo Manzi's costume store in West Hampstead, and it's like the biggest dressing up box you've ever been in. And for instance, Vicky, we found this great pink Kappa top, and it never occurred to us that that's what she would always wear. But when we looked for more outfits, they just didn't resonate in the same way. And similarly with Marjorie and her blue, same sort of blue you're wearing. I shouldn't have said that. You know, that blue was just her, and there's a kind of vibrancy about those colours. I mean, the terrible thing is...
Now you're being nice about the blue, aren't you?
Now I'm being nice about the blue. Do you know what? The lady who hired that out to us closed her business and said, do you want to take that outfit? And I said, wow, that's so kind, I'd love to. She goes, 10 grand. And so I said, well, good luck. If you can get 10 grand for it, good luck to you. And in the end, she came back. But I still paid a ton of money. So I'd like one of you to make a Marjorie advert with me so I can hire the costume back to you and make my money back, please. I was in Las Vegas, and a man came up to me pretty much at the height of Little Britain. And he said, I work for Kappa. And I went, oh, right. He goes, Vicky Pollard wears Kappa. I went, yeah, I know. He goes, you've killed Kappa in the UK. And I kind of waited for the smile to break. He went, no, you really have killed Kappa in the UK. And it wasn't intentional. And all I could say was, well, you're in Vegas, you might win big. So that was a surprise. Although, how big were Kappa?
No,
Kappa weren't that big at that time anyway, were they?
The fact that Kappa was perfect for Vicky says a lot about Kappa.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, I should have said that, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I think.
But we just take kernels of the truth, and then we just make them bigger. And actually, David was very, very good to work with because he was very clear and insisted we have real clarity. And actually, we came through at a similar time as the League of Gentlemen, who were a big influence on us, and we were a bit of an influence on them, I guess, because we were at the Edinburgh Festival together. And Reeves Shearsmith from the League of Gentlemen always used to ask this question when they were writing, which is, what is the thing of it? Which is a strange sentence, but it's what is the thing of it? What are you going for?
Right.
What are you going for? And we used to keep that in our minds. What are we going for? And so when we did Vicky Pollard, you know, there's a million other things she could have been, but actually, maybe what made it work the way it did was the fact that we actually closed them down a little bit and really tried to focus on what they were. You know, Marjorie was a weight loss leader. She could have been a life coach. She may be in her next incarnation, but there we kind of went, weight loss, let's focus on that. And I think, and actually, if you boil it right down, you know, David's character, I mean, it's all she ever said. You know, just that one line, or computer says no. You know, those characters, they didn't say a lot else. And those lines really helped us. And like when you see, you know, one of my favourite advertising campaigns as a kid was Tell Sid. You know, it was a British Gas, wasn't it? The privatisation.
Yes.
If you see Sid, tell him. And it had the whole country talking, and it was just one line. And everybody, I remember the newspapers, I was only 12 or 13, but I remember everybody wanted to know who Sid was. It was you know, you just have one, it's all right to have one thing, I think, in an advert or a sketch.
Is it okay to have one thing and always stick to that thing? When do you know when to change? How do you know when to change it or develop it?
I think in comedy, the audience laugh a bit less each time if you don't change it. But don't thank you if you don't give them what they want. You know, to do a Kenny Craig sketch, the hypnotist, without saying, look into the eyes, would have felt like we were shortchanging them. Well, that's your balance, isn't it? That's your test, to establish something and then to work out how to move it. I mean, like I say, I think the Go Compare advert is a brilliant example because they surprise you now, don't they? You think you're watching a different advert and then he pops up and you go, ah, you've had me.
Yeah.
So I think that's a brilliant way, it's a brilliant way of doing it. They've managed to make that character work in all different kind of genres of commercial, and I think it's so clever.
Do you think, I mean, there was a time, and you've mentioned League of Gentlemen, we've obviously know Little Britain, God, we can talk about loads, where central characters were key in comedy, in sitcoms and sketch shows. Do you think that's changing now? Do you think that's falling away?
Well, it's interesting because sketch shows are hard to make, and they're expensive to make, they're time-consuming to make. You know, I'm not playing one character, I might be playing 15 characters in an episode. And actually that, by the way, is one of the reasons you got Lou and Andy every week, is economy of scale. Is that if we could have afforded to take 2 years writing a series and have new characters in every episode, maybe we would have done that. But there was an expectation, deliver. And once you pay 30 grand to have a Bubbles fat suit made, you can't only use it for 30 seconds of screen time. What was the question? I forgot.
It was more
no,
because
I was talking about myself.
No, it's fine. We're interested.
So
we are interested.
Quite good.
But it was more about, there was a time when sitcoms, sketches were like main characters, you had these central characters, and now it seems that there's less of those. Yeah,
so I think, I mean, I've been convinced that it's partly to do just with the family don't sit down in the same way and watch television in the same way as a family as often in the same way. Everyone has a TV in their own room. People are not even watching on TV. They're watching on phones and iPads and what have you. And there's so many more places to watch. And, you know, you can even have Netflix, 3 people in your house watching different things on Netflix at the same time. So I think that there's that sense of monoculture isn't the same. Although you've just had a hit like The Bodyguard, and actually Doctor Who had over 8 million viewers the other night, so everyone did sit down. But I think they sit down less often. I mean, you always hear, you know, we used to judge ourselves by hearing, oh, To the Manor Born had 25 million viewers that one episode, and so you think you've got a lot of viewers. And I was like, well, yeah, but there were only 3 channels at that time.
Yeah.
And one of them was showing snooker, probably, so... Of course everyone was watching. ITV was on strike, probably. So you know, so we shouldn't be too tough on ourselves. That the monoculture has splintered somewhat. We are more tribal. We're more tribal in our politics, aren't we? Your Brexit or your Remain. We've become a bit more tribal. I don't think there is as much shared experience anymore. Actually.
Different and loads more choices.
And loads more choices, yeah. But still things break through. Still the meerkats is, you know, a phenomenon, and it's still possible to have a phenomenon.
Obviously, in a traditional sort of 30-second spot, you've got time to take 0 to hero, to lay up a joke, to take an audience on a journey. And there's been a proliferation of short-form content, so 6 seconds to make the hit. What's your impression of that, and what's your advice, I suppose, from a creative point of view as to how to make the most of such a short amount of attention?
Well, I love those things. I mean, I remember when the bumpers sort of started happening over here, about 20 years ago, didn't they? Where you were watching Coronation Street and you just had a 5-second thing, or Big Brother had those campaign with the flies, and they were very short. I like them, and I always feel as a viewer, particularly if you've established them in a longer form originally, then you can do that kind of callback. Again, what is the thing of it? It's Reese Shearsmith's thing. Just hit it and get to it, and don't overthink it as well. I know it's hard sometimes in this industry when I talk about listening to other voices, when sometimes there's so many voices. I mean, I've filmed adverts where the client's over there, the agent's over there, the director's over there, the writers are over there, and it's hard sometimes to keep a single vision when you have so many masters. But trust that original idea, because usually often that first or second idea is the right one. I think there's a reason why you thought of it first. That's worked for me and David.
Any other questions? One over here.
Hello.
Would you mind standing up and giving us your name as well?
Yes. Hi, I'm Adam. I'm from Gain Theory, a global marketing effectiveness consultancy. So really successful characters tend to often land a catchphrase, but I understand that can't be planned. You don't know whether it catches until it airs. When you're writing characters, what's a sign of success for you? Is there any giveaway to whether something's going to be successful?
You know, the thing about catchphrases is obviously we had some popular ones that are still used today, 12, 15 years after they were first heard, and they are organic. They're far more organic than you think. The best catchphrases usually is when the catchphrase, just that short phrase, told you everything you needed to know about that character. Computer says no. I mean, it's not just what she says, it's how she says it. The fact that she's just not taking responsibility for anything. I'm the only gay in the village. Well, there's no way you're the only gay in the village, but your pride and your assertiveness in saying that. But with all catchphrases, we never thought, when we were writing The Only Gay in the Village, we didn't know that there was going to be a catchphrase in that sketch. And we didn't know till we'd done the sketch and we came to write the second sketch. Oh, okay, that's his catchphrase. Oh, right, okay. So we sort of listened to the character in a way. I've come up with a new I was doing, the other day, I wish I was doing Little Britain because I had one. It was just my mum. Whenever we were young and we were going to Kenwood, you know Kenwood in Highgate, we go into the concerts. It was really hard to park. So we'd have to park about like a mile away, and then you'd occasionally see empty spaces on the way back. And my mum just spent the whole walk going, oh, we should have parked there. Oh, we should have parked there. Oh, we should have parked there. And I was just thinking, I wish we were doing Little Britain again. We should have parked there. If anyone wants me to do it for an advert, let me know. Should have parked there. And of course, I know that we'd at the end, she'd have a 2-car drive at her house. And you know that she'd park in the drive spot further from the front door, and she'd get out the car and go, oh, I should have parked there. So, and in the end, I think we see that she's parked on top of a car. We play around with it. But sometimes it's just that one little thing. It's that one little thing, but it's got to come from truth. You know, it's got to come from that kernel of truth. I don't know if I answered your question or just said something funny, I'm not sure.